All right, we're back and talking all things Helldivers, and I wanted to post yesterday, but as some of you know, YouTube is not my full-time job, so when IRL comes knocking, I have to answer. But with that being said, we've just got some breaking news from Super Earth. Welcome to the channel. This is LtBuzzLitebeer, and we've not only got a new major order, but a new stratagem to unlock, which is news, because it's been a while. There's also some Sony whispers, a little loadout fun I've been rocking, and much more, so stay tuned for all of that. Thanks so much for the love and support you've been showing me and the channel. Remember to hit subscribe and to ring that notifications bell to receive my latest upload alerts. And here's the latest from everyone's favorite eagle sweat spreading shooter, Helldivers. I nailed it last video, and here we go again with the famous 30-second Superstore reset, which is good for the next 19 hours or so. So you've got the Executioner heavy body armor with Fortified for reduced recoil and 50% explosive damage resistance, which is kind of handy versus the bots. You've also got the matching Executioner helmet, the Fighter Pilot-esque Trench Paramedic helmet, and the CM21 Trench Paramedic Hybrid light medium armor with medkit for +2 stems and 2 seconds more stem duration, which I personally love this armor, especially when paired with the stem booster. There, I didn't time it, but I feel good we came in under the 30-second threshold. Shifting over to the Galactic War, and we are finally starting to see signs of life, as it's been a while since we were last tasked with liberations for stratagems, besides those forced upon us MD-17 anti-tank mines. Anyways, here's the latest dispatch from Helldivers HQ. The Ministry of Defense has finalized preparations to augment super destroyers with the capability to fire, listen to this, Orbital Napalm Barrages. However, critical shortages of polystyrene foam and scrap metal has caused production to stall. Every minute these shortages exist, millions of super credits and citizen work hours go to waste, an economic drain upon every citizen's prosperity. They must be rectified immediately. Fortunately, Intel has identified a large automaton repository of unexpanded polystyrene on Vernon Wells. Well, it's back on the menu, near the ruins of the destroyed Seaf base on the planet. The automatons produce this material in massive quantities, without regard for the environmental consequences, neither do the Helldivers, I would argue, to package in-transit units. Scrap metal can be acquired from the automatons themselves. Liberate the polystyrene stockpile on Vernon Wells and collect enough automaton scrap metal to jumpstart Orbital Napalm Barrage production. This environmentally friendly effort, will recycle the brutal instruments of socialist imperialism into increased security for our citizens. Like I always say when I read these dispatches, the wording they use in here is just incredible. I love these things. So, just looking back on it all, what does it all mean? Well, we can't currently get to Vernon Wells, and instead, we're going to have to either go through Aesir Pass or Tarsh to gain access to our primary objective. Now, Aesir Pass is well known to bot divers, and Tarsh is one of those new spooky forest biomes ushered in with escalation. But of the two, Aesir Pass might be the better option here, as it seems to have more divers on it already. Also attached to this major order, because it does have two parts, is to crush 500 million bots, without specifics either, just overall kill count. This one also has the more standard 5-day timer, so yeah, it's back to bots we go, but if we can pull it off, we secure the Orbital Napalm Barrages along with 50 medals. And continuing with the theme of medals, today's daily or personal order is to kill 400 bots, which as always is shared across the squad, and it shouldn't take you more than one mission to complete. No fancy recommendations here, just spill some oil and grab the medals. Good luck. I got pinged a couple of days ago about this post from the official Helldivers Discord, posted by Shams Jorjani, the studio CEO, asking what I thought about it and so on. So here it is. This kicked off when a Discord member asked, speaking of business, how are the talks with Sony going? I still have some friends in those countries that want the game. To which Jorjani responded, good. they're visiting tomorrow. Full day of planning and discussions. Now, also, there was a question about Sony's involvement with Arrowhead and if Sony influenced business and or game direction, to which Jorjani also responded. Tons on the business side. Helldivers is their baby too. Now, we know from previous messages from both Johan and Jorjani that Sony is actively involved with Arrowhead, not in terms of the overall ownership of the studio, but they are involved with the financial backing. Also, Sony publishes Helldivers 2. And in terms of Sony, you would expect them to be involved with the game's development because Helldivers 2 is their fastest selling game of all time. Also, if you've been following Sony for a while now, Helldivers 2 was a small part of their 2022 plans to push their overall portfolio to 12 live service games out by 2025. It was kind of the company-wide initiative laid out by then CEO Jim Ryan. Also in that gaggle of live service games was another title you might recognize, Concord, which is currently tanking, as are those aspirations to get to 12 titles because it's now been cut down to just half of that initial goal, with some thinking it could be cut down even further, which, as I think about it now, could actually be somewhat beneficial to Helldivers 2 and Arrowhead. I mean, that's overall less competition for the budget within Sony and so on. Anyways, where I was actually headed with the Jorjani comments and that DM I received was leading up to theories and whispers that with Sony reps visiting Arrowhead, this could lead to the long-awaited negotiations to get those 170 plus regions and countries Sony previously restricted after the PSN mandatory linking requirement back into the fold and helldiving again. And to be frank, I honestly don't know what the meetings could have going. I mean, there could be plans for future funding needs, DLC, proposed delivery dates, and so on, or a million other things besides the Sony lockout. Twinbeard also weighed in on this trending discussion about the Sony meeting with this one. As far as I know, but correct me if I'm wrong, it was actually said there would be a meeting or several with Sony. Someone then assumed it was for the region lock. Not sure if they'll be talking about that, but if anything regarding that comes out after said meeting or meetings, we'll holler. Which is kind of what I thought as well. The meeting was in place, but as far as the particulars of what was being discussed, those were of course left out of the announcement. Me being me, I also tried reaching out to Shams Jorjani over on Twitter, but as a publication of this video, I've not received a response, and honestly, I'm not expecting one. Moving over to the gaming sites and publications, GamesRadar has apparently been sifting through Johan's million responses he left over on Reddit, running with this headline: Helldivers 2 creative boss agrees the game has gotten less about a fun, chaotic, challenging, emergent experience and too much about challenge and competitiveness. Arrowhead's team is apparently, quote, tired from a long development. GamesRadar then went on to outline many of Johan's responses, ranging from how the local flora can actually slow down laser beams, over to the studio's tech debt dilemma and how balancing new content with fixing long-standing issues has led to an overall tired development team. They also referenced his comments about how new team members are onboarded, that they're being asked to sift through the hundreds of previously programmed systems within the game, and as expected, mistakes are happening. And then finally, GamesRadar concludes with Johan's headline-making statement, quote, the key issue that I see is the delta from launch, where the game was about having a fun, chaotic, challenging, emergent experience with like-minded players, has been eroded through a shift in focus to challenge and competitiveness without considering the more playful experience. Again, and I think I've covered this ad nauseum in my previous uploads, but that initial Helldivers experience was what hooked us, right? And it's been this move the goalpost approach to balancing that the studio has shown that we've been through with every patch, and that's what's driving us players bonkers. Johan nails what we want when he says, quote, it was about having a fun, chaotic, challenging, emergent experience, and it has been eroded through a shift in focus to challenge and competitiveness. I find that's the perfect summation of the issues. Now what comes is Arrowhead's approach to try to correct the math so we can eventually land at a different result. See their 60-day plan, studio manifesto, and so on. Since we've just come off of a long week of killing a lot of bugs, I wanted to throw an alternative loadout to you that I've been rocking from time to time, to try out something different. I mean, it's no incendiary breaker with ammo supply backpack type of build, but the ARC-12 Blitzer, when paired up with the Guard Dog Rover, does a decent job of handling the massive chaff armies you see on Helldive and Super Helldive difficulty missions. Now, since I don't use any sort of anti-tank weapons with this loadout, I instead load up on those call-ins like the Rail Cannon Strike, Orbital Precision Strike, and the all-powerful, almighty Autocannon Sentry. But full disclaimer about the Blitzer here, it, number one, lacks the effective range to connect with flyers. Number two, it can also be inconsistent with traveling to targets, especially if those targets are positioned behind a beast you've already killed that hasn't yet despawned. Number three, it could do with an ever so slight bump up in rate of fire, say another 10 to 15 RPMs, but there is a strength here that it also staggers targets, which is super handy, especially light and medium targets. And I also want to make mention, if something like a hunter just comes super jumping right up next to you, if you know, you know, even when you aim the crosshairs directly at it, the arc stream out of the ARC-12 Blitzer just goes in another direction from time to time. But when you can keep the horde at a medium distance and have the Blitzer and Guard Dog Rover both connecting in tandem, you can almost pen down a full bug breach, at least until your squad drops an airstrike directly on top of you with no call out for danger close. Give that combo a shot versus the bugs and let me know how you like it, because now it's time to turn our attention to your top 3 comments from my last Helldivers video, starting off with number 1 from Garmfleef. They say, crazy that a liquid-based fire seeping through cracks in armor and melting electrical components is, quote, unrealistic. And yeah, I completely agree with this one. We've talked about the studio's use of selective realism, that is, using it as a rationale for a change when it suits them, and here it is again in use with the flamethrower and fire effects in general. Number 2 comment comes to us from Nothing Much 6666. That's a lot of sixes there. Anyways, what do they have to say? What pisses me off is, but the player flamethrower could bypass armor and go through walls. That's not realistic, is the excuse for the changes to the flamethrower, when players have been pointing out for months that enemy attacks, Hulk Scorcher, rockets, bile, cannon, turrets, tanks, general gunfire, etc., can go straight through walls and terrain, and they still can and do, and they've done nothing about it. They sure fixed it up quickly when our weapons were doing it, though. Actually, I've been waiting to see this analogy pop up because it's been happening since launch, right? How can we be tapped through cover, but the flames have to be the focus of the nerfs? I hear you. Yes. And number 3 comes to us from Victor Nguyen 1175. Quote, you can tell that they have their minds in the completely wrong place if their morale is being negatively affected by criticism that they've been given for months that they actively refuse to listen to. They're blaming us for making them feel bad about decisions they made without consulting the player base, who has been telling them nonstop not to make, changing things that nobody asked to change, and in fact, sometimes we're very happy with, all the while ignoring priority issues with the game that are broken on a fundamental level. And yeah, that's the issue right now, right? Meddling for the sake of realism while making changes nobody was asking for. We respond, and apparently that puts them in a bad state of mind. Congrats to this video's top 3 comments, and if you want to make it into my next top 3, you first need to leave a comment on this video, and who knows, you might just see your name up in lights. Remember to hit subscribe and ring that notifications bell to receive my latest upload alerts. All my socials, including links to all of today's sources, can be found down in the video description. Shout out to the now over 241,000 of you incredible ladies and gents from across the globe who have taken the plunge, have hit subscribe, and tune in daily to support me and my content. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.